Imagine having a massive power outage. Can you imagine a day without electricity? It's a power plant, and not an ordinary power plant, but a nuclear power plant in Fukushima, Japan. So for the past few days, there's been a lot of coverage of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station. Why is that? To begin with, Japan needs to import about 90% of its energy requirements. Its first commercial nuclear power reactor began operating in mid-1966, and nuclear energy has been a national strategic priority since 1973. Japan started its nuclear research program in 1954, with 230 million yen being budgeted for nuclear energy. The law promoted three principles: democratic methods, independent management, and transparency that are the basis of nuclear research activities, as well as promoting international cooperation. The inauguration of the Atomic Energy Commission in 1956 promoted nuclear power development and utilization. The first reactor to produce electricity in Japan was a prototype boiling water reactor, the Japan Power Demonstration Reactor, JPDR, which ran from 1963 to 1976 and provided a large amount of information for later commercial reactors. By the end of the 1970s, the Japanese industry had largely established its own domestic nuclear power production capacity, and today it exports to other East Asian countries and is involved in the development of new reactor designs likely to be used in Europe. Despite being the only country to have suffered the devastating effects of nuclear weapons in wartime, with over 100,000 deaths, Japan embraced the peaceful use of nuclear technology to provide a substantial portion of its electricity. However, following the tsunami which killed 19,000 people, which triggered the Fukushima nuclear accident, which killed no one in March 2011, public sentiment shifted markedly so that there were widespread public protests calling for nuclear power to be abandoned. However, in 2013, the Nuclear Regulation Authority, NRA, established new regulatory requirements, and just 10 reactors have since received clearance from the regulator to restart. What makes it even more interesting is the story of the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Station is an out-of-commission nuclear plant located in the towns of Futaba and Okuma, 250 kilometers north of Tokyo City in Japan. The first unit of the nuclear station was commissioned in 1971. In total, the station has 6 boiling water reactors, which together have a power generation capacity of 4.69 gigawatts. Fukushima Daiichi was the first nuclear power plant to be constructed and operated entirely by Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO. Units 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the nuclear complex were damaged in a series of events after the 11th of March 2011 earthquake, Tokuchiyo Tawaka Oki earthquake, and tsunami that struck the nation. The Toku earthquake caused a tsunami. A tsunami, Japanese for harbor wave, is a series of powerful waves caused by the displacement of a large body of water. The Toku tsunami produced waves up to 40 meters, 132 feet high. More than 450,000 people became homeless as a result of the tsunami. More than 15,500 people died. The tsunami also severely crippled the infrastructure of the country. The Fukushima nuclear disaster released toxic radioactive materials into the environment and forced thousands of people to evacuate their homes and businesses. The earthquake had cut off the power supply needed to pump cooling water into the damaged reactors. A portion of the fuel rods that create heat through nuclear reaction was exposed due to the failure of the cooling system caused by the tsunami. This failure resulted in a nuclear explosion in the reactors. It's been 12 years since this incident took place. What's happening at the Fukushima plant 12 years after the meltdown? Japan is preparing to release a massive amount of treated radioactive wastewater into the sea. Japanese officials say the release is unavoidable and should start soon. Why release the water now? Fukushima Daiichi has struggled to handle contaminated water since the 2011 disaster. The government and TEPCO say the tanks must make way for facilities to decommission the plant, such as storage space for melted fuel debris and other highly contaminated waste. The tanks are 96% full and expected to reach their capacity of 1.37 million tonnes in the fall. They also want to release the water in a controlled, treated way to avoid the risk that contaminated water would leak in case of another major quake or tsunami. It will be sent through a pipe from the sampling tanks to a coastal pool to be diluted with seawater and released through an undersea tunnel to a 0.1 kilometre (0.6 mile) offshore. but there is an anxiety and anger over Japan's nuclear wastewater plan. But since it was announced 2 years ago, the plan has been deeply controversial in Japan, with local communities expressing concerns about contamination. Fishing and seafood industry groups in Japan and the wider region have also voiced concerns about their livelihoods, as they fear consumers will avoid buying seafood. What do critics say? UN-appointed human rights experts have opposed the Japanese plan, as have environmental activists. Greenpeace has released reports casting doubt on TEPCO's treatment process, alleging it does not go far enough in removing radioactive substances. Critics say Japan should, for the time being, keep the treated water in the tanks. They argue this buys time to develop new processing technologies and allows any remaining radioactivity to naturally reduce. There are also some scientists who are uncomfortable with the plan. They say it requires more studies on how it would affect the ocean bed and marine life. What have Japan's neighbours said? China has demanded that Japan reach an agreement with regional countries and international institutions before it releases the water. South Korea's parliament passed a resolution last week opposing the water release plan. Officials are also launching intense inspections of seafood and are sticking to an existing ban on Japanese seafood imports from regions around the Fukushima plant. How has Japan responded? Japanese authorities and TEPCO have sought to convince critics by explaining the science behind the treatment process. The UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA), has published a report endorsing Japan. TEPCO filters the Fukushima water through its Advanced Liquid Processing System (ALPS), which reduces most radioactive substances to acceptable safety standards, apart from tritium and carbon-14. The filtered water goes through another treatment and is then diluted with seawater to reduce the remaining substances' concentrations before it is released into the ocean. Japan's government says the final level of tritium, about 15,000 becquerels per litre, is much safer than the level required by regulators for nuclear waste discharge, or by the World Health Organization for drinking water. TEPCO has said the carbon-14 level would also meet standards. TEPCO and the Japanese government have conducted studies to show the discharged water will present little risk to humans and marine life. Many scientists have also backed the plan. The water release will be a drop in the ocean, both in terms of volume and radioactivity. Japan also pointed out that other nuclear plants in the region, particularly those in China, discharge water with much higher levels of tritium. But the biggest vindication may lie with the IAEA report released by the agency's chief, Rafael Grossi, while visiting Japan. The report, which came after a 2-year investigation, found that TEPCO and Japanese authorities were meeting international safety standards in several aspects, including facilities, inspections and enforcement, environmental monitoring, and radioactivity assessments. Of course, the world is divided by Japan's plan, but with Japan being a role model for the rest of the world, they will be able to justify their plans. What do you think about all of this? Do let us know in the comment section below. And if you want to stay up to date, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again in the next video.